Okay, this is the last in a short series on Grindbox using Solidworks and the weldments features. In this last one, we're going to cover the lip portion. I did two configurations of the lip, one with a sharp edge like a traditional lawn tramp would have, and then one with a curved top like a more modern lip would have. So what we have, I started out obviously, and if you look over at the feature tree here, the model tree, you'll see that it's the weldment. Um, there's a weldment placement here at the top. When you use the weldments functions, it automatically puts that there. This is my master sketch. Um, I have a 5-foot radius on the lip that may be too steep for BMX. Probably just right for skateboards. You'll have to test that out on your own. I've got a number of things built in here. I know that I want 8-foot centers on my support structure going up the lip here, and so you'll notice that this right here is a measurement taken. It's the arc distance, and because you're bending your board across this thing, the arc distance is important. You want those cross pieces to land on 8-inch centers, and it's not measured on the chord distance. The chord distance would be from this point to that point straight across. That's not actually an accurate measurement, and over a long distance, if you're going to build a much bigger ramp, you would see that it would start to become misaligned. You want the chord distance, which is actually measured. What you can't see is there's a construction arc right here. And let me actually get into the sketch here. Let me go and edit it. So what you can't see is right there, there's actually a construction arc. And that construction arc, to get the arc distance, you pick the two endpoints and the arc itself, and that gives you your arc distance. And then what I did is to get the array, it's a circular array, to get that properly, I then did a driven angular dimension, and I set my patterning to this number when I actually do the pattern. I had to come back in and add some things. So the original lip, you can see, is right here, this section. And then I wanted to do a curved one, so I added this piece right here, this portion. That's actually, if you notice the 5.5-inch dimension there, that makes it so that I can cut that out of a 2x6. We're going to use a number of those. There's other ways you could do it. Instead of cutting this last little section here out of 2x6s, you could just put in some more cross pieces. They tend to get crowded down here at the bottom, right here where my mouse is, or my pointer. So that's the reason I did these pieces instead. It accomplishes the same thing. If you don't have a jigsaw, this may be a harder thing to do. I wouldn't be constructing any of these ramps without being able to borrow or have one on hand anyways. So it's also going to be handy at times to have a table saw. You can get most of your angles with a skill saw if you're good with a skill saw. If you're not good with a skill saw, then you're probably going to need a table saw at some point. You'll notice that this is 1 9/16. That's wet lumber. That's so that we can put a 2x4 across the top there on that particular configuration. So you're seeing two configurations built into one master sketch. I added an extra. I made it so that the plywood was just a round number, 5 feet, with the added rolled portion. And you'll see it as we roll forward. The reason that I'm not showing me actually constructing this, I found that the videos run longer. And not only do they run longer, but there's lots of back and forth. There are going to be times where maybe I do show the videos where I'm actually constructing it, but there's quite a bit of back and forth. I probably was in this master sketch, 5 to 10 extra times. I didn't do all this in one pass. I went back and edited it and got the final product with a couple of passes through the model tree. And so it's just more presentable this way. I'm able to speak to what is a finished product instead of trying to figure out how to best construct this. And like I said, when you get to the end of this video, you may say, hey, I'd build that a little bit differently. That's great. I wholeheartedly encourage however you'd construct it. This is just how I would do it. So anyways, we'll move forward here. And so the first thing that I constructed was one side. There's a couple of ways to do it. Old school would be to notch the sides out and actually set the plywood in there. It's hard to screw the cross pieces in. You end up having to scab on little inner pieces in here, and if you're doing something that's going to get a lot of abuse. With the size and strength of screws you can get these days, with the really strong deck screws, I just screw them straight in from the bottom. If you're worried about a lot of heavy abuse, you can add pieces. Let me roll forward here. So there's the other side. What I was saying is that you can add this sketch right here is going to give me the top and bottom back pieces. And there's the first 2x4s. So all I'm saying is when you add these front pieces here, you could add support structure underneath. I personally think that with the amount of bracing you could do in the middle if you needed to, you probably wouldn't have to do that. But again, do your own thing. So let's see here. And then what I did is the next sketch is down here. I thought after I did this, there's a couple of ways to do this. You actually could plan this ramp so that the top ply stops back in here somewhere, because it nets out so that the ply would end up flush with the riding surface, the approach surface to the ramp. What this actually does is this comes out at the bottom quadrant of the arc, and so you end up with a full plywood thickness as you're entering the ramp. Doesn't matter for BMX, for skateboard it's going to make a difference. It's going to be, especially with guys that are riding or using smaller wheels on their skateboards, you're going to feel it. So what you might end up doing is putting another layer on top of the first layer of maybe skate light or whatever your favorite surface is, and that stuff's thin enough that it'll help with this approach. And then even still, you might end up putting a piece of sheet metal at the very bottom. I absolutely hate the noise sheet metal makes, and but if you're looking for a really smooth approach, sheet metal at the very bottom might be the way to go. The other thing is sometimes they curl up and then you can cut people and all that stuff. So but anyway, so I hesitated whether or not to put this one right here at the very end. You'll see how I did it though. And so what I did is, this thing is perpendicular. It's straight up and down to the quadrant, and it's centered. That way, where this touches this radius, it's touching it in the middle, and both of the outer edges are actually below that surface slightly. I'd much rather have that than if you line the edges up. If the edges are flush with this arc, you end up with the center being a little high. Again, to each his own, and we're talking about tiny amounts, so that might be like a 30-second. So then I did the circular pattern, and I drove that circular pattern is driven off of that dimension. You can actually see here that it's a formula, and it's linked to the original master sketch, as you can see right there. So that's how I drove that pattern. Also, I left that first one out there because it's not going to fit. In fact, so here's the first one, the second one's gone, third one's going to have to be ripped down. And so then after that, I trimmed that one. This one right here I trimmed. And then I deleted that first one, with a body delete, and you end up with your basic ramp. I believe I also put one little filler in right here because there's not much to screw to. So let's see, what else did I do here? Oh, I added one on the flat. I don't know if you could cut, that's going to be a pretty dangerous cut with a skill saw. So unless you have a table saw, I'm not sure you can make a cut that flat. You might have to scoot this back even further and get a little bit more of a shallow cut. I just don't know if that cut is sensible or not with a skill saw versus a table saw. So there's one on the flat there because these little wings tend to break, and really you could almost cut those off half the time they break off. Let's see, and then I added this piece here. Again, this is another piece cut on a real steep angle with a very sharp edge. Definitely couldn't do that without a table saw cutting towards the fence, and you run a, well, let's see, could you cut away from the fence? And then I've got the ply. And again, if you're picky, I'd actually cut that square or flat with the top. Not square, but I would cut that level with the top. In fact, I might even bob it off more than that so you don't hook your trucks on it or whatever. Maybe sand it down. There's a bunch of things you could do. So that's it for the basic launch ramp style. This is a sharp-edged launch ramp. Great for BMX, not so great for skateboarding. So then what I did is I've got a second configuration. This is the default. And then on the second configuration, we'll click over to that now. You can see the finished product because it rolled the tree forward, but I'm going to roll it back up. And what I did on the second configuration, I actually suppressed some of the last pieces that I knew I wasn't going to need. So this is that filler piece, and then this is the actual plywood. Oh, and on the plywood, I believe that I used 3/8. That may not be thin enough to get it to form. Generally what I'll do is soak the plywood overnight in water. So you can either spray the water on top. You can also make, if you're going to build a larger ramp, you can actually make little soaking tub out of just some 10 mil plastic and just anything that will drape the plastic down and make just a little shallow tub that you can weight the plywood underwater. But you really want to make sure that the plywood's going to flex to that shape. So if you end up having to do 2/4 inch pieces, that's better than busting 3/8, or half is actually very strong. And unless it's a huge ramp, very rarely does half bend properly. So I think I did this with 3/8, but you might have to go clear down to 1/4. Anyways, all that being said, the next configuration, I added a plane at an angle, and that plane is going to be used to place the last horizontal. And you can see where my sketch is at here. And you'll notice on this particular member that I placed, I'll actually highlight the sketch. I placed this member so that the corner is tangent to the radius, and the entire face is placed on, let me see if I can highlight the sketch for you. That way this will be easier to see. Show. So what I did is I placed the board, this line right here, construction line, is tangent to this curve. That way the point that touches is this top edge and nothing else interferes with this curvature. If I placed it half and half, half would be under like it is now, half would stick out, or it would bridge across it. I chose to do it this way. I'll put all my screws in right at the very top edge here, and that'll be my bend over point. You wouldn't construct it this way in real life, so from here on out you would have already actually cut these plywood pieces to their curved shape. But this is the way I hacked the original into being something that was a second, a curved launch ramp. So then I body deleted a whole bunch of crap out on that body delete there. I got rid of the side, that top piece, and I did that because I'm gonna just mirror over the fixed portion of the side. The body extrude 4 here is the first piece. This is 2x6 material that's been jigsawed out or skill saw. You probably could do it with a skill saw. It's not too big of a curve. You could get that with a couple passes. So jigsaw or skill saw, doesn't really matter. I personally would skill saw all the pieces and then jigsaw the curve, the arc. Patterned these out. Again, what I did is I took the inside distance to get this pattern. You've got your first piece and then you have 3 spaces. It wasn't some really easy math. I just hack and slashed it. You could probably set up a formula. Basically what you end up with is a distance that gets you close, and then I took the last little bit and divided it by 3 because there's 3 spaces here, and I managed to get a round a number that worked. It wasn't a round number, it's a non-repeating ugly number. Let's see, it's yeah, you can see 7.58333, and that repeats forever. I think I ended up dividing 0.25 by 3. So it's an ugly number. You could set up a formula for it. I just did the math and got there, and so those are my spaced out pieces. And then next is the trim. I just trimmed off this little portion here. This right here is just CAD. You would never do this in real life. This is all just CAD stuff. So then I added the back portion right here to get me netted out at 5 feet. So now this bottom edge here, you can see down here is 5 feet. So then I believe here at some point I'm going to mirror this bad boy over. What I did there, let me roll back real quick. That lower piece obviously was sitting in its old position. I had to move it forward, so there's a move copy forward, and then I mirrored over the plywood, and I drew a sketch in. Let me turn that master sketch off. So this sketch right here is going to be a piece of lumber to connect all these together and something to screw to. Ends up being same old thing, just a 2x4 across the back. I cut extrude because these were not weldments. I couldn't use any sort of trim command, so I cut extruded the same profile back through them to get the correct cutout. So now these shapes have got a little more complicated. Still not a big deal even with a skill saw. And then I trimmed this top piece. You can see now it's flush right there. Before it was sticking up. And so that would be a rip before you install that piece with a skill saw. And then the plywood. And this one you're probably definitely going to want to use 1/4 inch because that curve is going to be a hard radius to get with a piece of 3/8 ply. I put 3/8 on here, but really you'd probably want 2 1/4 inch pieces. And then the last thing I did, I actually cut, only did one side. Let me fix that real quick, didn't see that. I cut the ply on the sides again like I do with most of my ramps, and the reason I did that is I want, when I'm dragging this around, I want the lumber to get all the damage, and I also don't want the sides to wick water up, so I try to always cut them 1/4 to 1/2 inch short. And so you can see the inside of this one. Just kind of rotate this around a little bit. If you wanted to, like I was saying at the start of the video, you could add bracing right here below these pieces to make it stronger. You could add an X back here. You could add pieces that run across the bottom here. Probably for skateboarding, you're not going to need any of that. BMX, if you're landing on this lip, you might need some more structure to it. The sides are 1/2-inch plywood. And so there's the curved one. And here's the standardized one. And it looks like Solidworks is tracking the difference. It is. It's configuration specific. So I'll fix that. So anyways, and then I actually added this thing to the assembly. So we'll close this out and you can see it's been added. One of the things I'm not liking that I'm seeing here is this. You know, if you're on a skateboard, you're definitely going to get hung up there. So I'd probably just take a skill saw and buzz the top corner of that off, or a sander. You know, you could decide what you wanted to do there. And so here's how it looks with just the straight launch ramp style. And here's how it looks with the curved launch ramp. Alrighty, and here you can see the other version with the curved lip. If I was going to go to the trouble to build one, I'd probably build this one. This one looks like it'd be more fun. You may have a certain preference, but I actually like this one better. I'll kind of roll this so you guys can see the underside construction. But I've tried to make these, like I said, you could always beef them up more. You could always remove a couple of these. That may be overdoing it. Really, I tried to build these so that you're using the least amount of material possible, because most people are on a budget. So again, I'd probably take a sander and sand that corner off right there, just so I wouldn't hit it with my trucks and bust up the plywood. And so this is it. This is the end of this series as well. I'm going to move on to some other little bit more complicated ramps. Hopefully you guys enjoyed it. Thanks.